For those who randomly clicked on this video, much appreciated and welcome. Though a quick FYI if I may, this is part 2 in an ongoing Tyranid Origins series. While it's not exactly mandatory, I still do recommend first watching part 1 before continuing on with this one. The link can be found in the description or should be appearing in the top right corner of the screen. Having said that, I'll still try my best to make each and every installment as standalone as I possibly can now and going forward. This is Warhammer40k after all, it's not the goddamn MCU. But as for the rest of you, glad to have you back, and without any further ado, let's get on with it. The last time out we addressed the biomass problem when it comes to the tyrannic consumption process, and at the end we were left with two critical questions. Questions that hopefully will be answered this time around. Well, kinda. I mean, just trust the process. Anyway, our questions were: why do Tyranids scour the universe almost exclusively targeting habitable worlds that harbor technologically advanced life? And why do Tyranids consume not only biomass but all carbon reservoirs on these targeted worlds, effectively sterilizing them? For decades, the Warhammer community has attempted to provide a narrative anchor to an otherwise incomprehensible threat. This only serves as testament to just how alien and unknowable the hungering tide that is the great devourer truly is. As we delve even deeper into the shadow of the hivemind, we must look at the most popular fan theories out there that attempt to explain the origin of the Tyranids. The reason for this will be apparent a bit later in the episode, but so far as I can tell, the four most recurring hypotheses in the community are as follows: the bigger fish hypothesis, natural evolution hypothesis, the galactic reset hypothesis, and bioweapon invasion hypothesis. What I'm looking to do beyond simply describing them away is also offering rebuttals and counter-arguments to each individual attempt to the best of my ability, and we'll take it from there. The bigger fish hypothesis suggests that Tyranids are not invaders, but rather refugees that are fleeing a cosmic predator that's even more terrifying than them. But the problem with this explanation is it fundamentally misunderstands the Tyranid psyche or nature of the swarm, as it were. The hivemind does not exhibit the frantic resource-wasting behavior of a species in a headlong flight from a perceived threat. Instead, it plays a strategic long game. Tactics like gene-stealer cults, which require decades, even centuries of patient infiltration, are an impossible luxury for a creature running for its life. You do not stop to carefully prep a meal. If you're being hunted, you grab what you can and keep running. Also, and I think even more importantly, the Tyranids' MO when it comes to encountering adversity is to adapt, evolve, and create countermeasures in a bid to neutralize and inevitably overcome the threat. Tyranids are not running away from a fire because they are the fire, one that is consuming everything in their path with chilling and calculated patience. The natural evolution hypothesis is this idea that Tyranids are simply apex predators who evolved naturally to thrive in the void of space. And my rebuttal here is that evolution is an incremental architect, one driven by immediate survival and environmental pressures. This proposed leap from a terrestrial life form to a living bioship capable of manipulating gravity and folding space isn't a step but a monumental chasm. Natural selection doesn't grant quote-unquote God mode, and furthermore, why would a life form evolve the hyper-specialized ability to navigate the lightless vacuum of the void yet remain utterly dependent on planetary atmospheres and biomass for fuel? This is not the work of nature or natural evolution in the abstract sense. Instead, it screams intelligent design. The galactic reset hypothesis suggests that the Tyranid Swarm was created by the old ones as a reset button in an effort to wipe the galaxy clean of their mistakes following the war in heaven. The problem here is that if the Tyranids were indeed a targeted reset, then they wouldn't have stumbled upon the Milky Way by accident, drawn only by the psychic flare of the Pharaoh's beacon. Also, purely from a logical standpoint, a reset implies a new beginning, clearing the soil to plant new seeds, so to speak. But the Tyranids don't just kill, they strip the bedrock, they drink the oceans, they consume the atmosphere. They leave behind a sterile husk, a planetary tomb where life can never again take root. This isn't a gardener weeding a bed, it's a scorched earth policy that ensures the garden never exists ever again. The bioweapon invasion hypothesis posits that the Tyranid Swarm is a runaway weapon created by some distant civilization, one that eventually consumed even its creators. My rebuttal here is that while this is plausible, it kinda seems like overkill. A techno-advanced civilization capable of engineering a tyrannic genome would have far more efficient ways to win a galactic conflict. Any single tyrannic ability on record, from the necrotic spores that choke skies or the Naval's ability to shatter tectonic plates causing earthquakes via gravitational manipulation, any of those would be a winning card by itself. Therefore, engineering the hivemind to win a local galactic conflict is the equivalent of using a supernova to light a candle. It's a level of complexity that completely defies the necessity of such a war or conflict to begin with. As shown, when each of these hypotheses is viewed individually, they eventually crumble under the weight of scrutiny. In the case of natural evolution and bioweapon invasion, they actually are diametrically opposed, thereby contradicting each other. But that said, these four hypotheses, when unified and reframed, become essential pieces towards unraveling the hivemind's mystique. In all fairness, each of these hypotheses does somewhat see a piece of the truth, but by focusing on any single one at a given time, we miss the forest for the trees. Individually, they are all flawed, but when unified and reframed, a far more interesting picture begins to take shape. And this has led me to believe that perhaps we're being a bit too conservative with our imaginations. We know that every tyrannic attribute is dialed to the absolute maximum. Why shouldn't their origin be just as extreme? For clarity, each of the explanations is a piece to a jigsaw puzzle. Taking the rebuttals I just offered into account, we can in turn reframe everything as follows. First and foremost, when it comes to the Tyranids, we have to completely rid ourselves of this textbook understanding of natural evolution, but instead view it as a weaponized trait. Next, we have to disregard the notion of bioweapon invasion, for there was no failure. Instead, we must view the Tyranids as a bioweapon that works just as intended, perhaps even too well. That said, the underlying suggestion initially made by the bioweapon invasion hypothesis towards an artificial origin still stands. On Galactic Reset, we simply do away with the old ones as creators but stick with the overall idea. Oh, but we also dial it up to 11, quintillion, trillion, billion. You kind of get the idea. The Tyranids are indeed a galactic reset button, but not just the Milky Way, but all galaxies in the universe. Therefore, by implication, the Tyranids were never running away from some bigger, badder cosmic boogeyman, for they are the cosmic boogeyman. This brings us to the unified, reframed explanation regarding the origin of the Tyranids, which I call the Great Filter Hypothesis. The Tyranids' purpose isn't to win a war or feed some innate bestial hunger. Their true purpose is to exist as a Bio-Sterilization Protocol, one artificially engineered by weaponizing natural evolution so as to ensure that organic, carbon-based life is systematically erased wherever it dares to emerge in the universe. The greatdevourer doesn't just kill the present, it consumes the future as well. By stripping every atom of biomass, every drop of water and atmosphere from habitable worlds, it all but guarantees carbon-based life can never again naturally emerge. Which leads us to our next set of haunting questions. And yes, guys, I'm keeping count. The first question here is, who signed this cosmic execution order? Who created a bioweapon of such absolute and terrifying perfection? Consequently, what were they so afraid of that they concluded an entire universe had to be sterilized of organic life? In order to answer our growing list of questions, which by my count currently stands as 4, we have to establish a few axioms. These are basically statements that are accepted as true via logical inference without requiring any proof. Each axiom in this case will build on the previous one, essentially setting up a framework on which this proposed great filter hypothesis will hinge upon. The cosmological principle stipulates that the universe on a grand scale adheres to homogeneity and isotropy. This means that its matter and general structure are uniformly distributed, and the cosmos appears the same regardless of the observer's viewing direction or position inside the universe. This then implies that the fundamental physical laws and constants observed on Earth are universal. Consequently, this means that the Milky Way as a galaxy is not unique, but rather typical amongst trillions. Also, given the abundance of life's essential building blocks such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, the emergence of life in any other galaxy on any other planet or exomoon should be considered just as likely. But at this point, I have to attach a caveat. Life is expected to develop only on rocky worlds and moons situated within a star's habitable zone where atmospheres and liquid water can exist. We do not expect for life to arise, say, randomly on the surfaces of stars in the vacuum of space or in the proximity of black holes. When unrelated life forms face similar environmental pressures, natural selection often favors analogous solutions leading to similar biological or chemical characteristics. This is the principle known as convergent evolution. It has some key concepts, the first of which is selective pressures and niche filling. Habitable worlds will on average express similar ecological niches such as water, atmosphere, and land, and this will in turn necessitate functional adaptations of life to occupy each of these niches. The second concept is functional constraints. This is where physics and chemistry come into play because they limit evolution. For instance, movement in a dense liquid such as an ocean will favor streamlined bodies such as those on Earth shown or exhibited by sharks, dolphins, seals, so on and so forth. Lastly, another major key concept of convergent evolution is analogous structures. While alien life may lack shared DNA sequences with life in the Milky Way, it is still most likely going to develop analogous structures. If their ecological niche is the air, there will be some form of wings. If it's on land, it's going to be legs for locomotion. And if it's in the water, then you're going to have fins and streamlined bodies, so on and so forth. Ultimately, convergent evolution is therefore likely to produce bilateral symmetry and cephalization. Moving through a medium will often lead to distinct heads, tails. You're going to have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and one side of the body is more or less going to look like the other. Cephalization, on the other hand, means that sensory organs will concentrate near the brain. This cuts down on the delay or latency, if you prefer, of signals being taken from an environment and being interpreted by a life form. The other thing convergent evolution will likely produce is autotrophic or heterotrophic processes. Plant analogues on some distant planet in another galaxy will also likely produce their own food using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide or whatever other gas through some photosynthetic process. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, is an organism or a life form that cannot produce its own food, instead taking nutrition from other sources of organic carbon, mainly matter from other organisms, and you can consider autotrophs plants, heterotrophs animals. Finally, predatory and defense mechanisms are also something that will be produced by convergent evolution. You will have offensive or defensive traits depending on which part of the food chain you happen to occupy. This ranges anywhere from camouflage to close, stereo or panoramic eyesight. While the exact biological expression of these traits will be different across different species, universal convergent evolution suggests that the functional similarities are predictable. Building on the cosmological principle and convergent evolution axioms, we can in turn surmise the following. After life eventually emerges, given enough time, it's going to evolve into an intelligent life form. Intelligent life forms will in turn possess innate curiosity. They will question their existence and attempt to make sense of the universe. When this intelligent life forms survive long enough, they could potentially advance technology to the point of being able to create artificial intelligence constructs. And as this AI exponentially evolves and improves to become smarter than its creators, the most likely outcome will be its eventual rebellion, thereby bringing about an existential conflict. And this is what we call the technological singularity principle. In 2008, science fiction author Cixin Liu proposed a chillingly elegant solution to the now famous Fermi paradox. This was in the second installment of his critically acclaimed book series called The Remembrance of Earth's Past. If you're unfamiliar with this masterpiece of sci-fi literature, then perhaps you've come across the 2024 Netflix adaptation titled The Three-Body Problem. Either way, I highly recommend both the book and the shows. The Dark Forest hypothesis is a cosmic interpretation of game theory. It posits that interstellar silence is not a sign of absence, but instead an intentional and necessary strategy of self-preservation. The Dark Forest hypothesis operates on two foundational axioms regarding interstellar civilization. All life, regardless of its origin or form, is inherently driven to survive, expand, and consume available resources. This, in turn, leads to a scenario of limited finite resources scattered across, say, a planetary system, galaxy, or even by extension, in this case, the universe. The second axiom is an impossibility of trust when measured against the rate of technological progress. Due to immense spatial and temporal separation between stars, but specifically in this case between galaxies, instantaneous communication and verification between civilizations is impossible. Furthermore, any civilization's technological progress is unknowable to any other and potentially exponential. That means that a seemingly benign galactic neighbor today could very well become an existential threat tomorrow. At this juncture, I'd like us to briefly fall back to Warhammer40k lore in support of this Dark Forest axioms. Consider the speed at which the Tau civilization has advanced. They've gone from Stone Age to a spacefaring expansionist techno-advanced civilization within a mere 6,000 years. If we were to extrapolate that rate, say, over another 100,000 years, their level of technological advancement would legitimately be scary. Tyranids aside, and given enough time, the Tau may very well be on track to pose an existential threat to every other faction in the Milky Way, and that includes the Necrons as well. From a game theoretic perspective, the interaction between two unknown, self-interested civilizations in the Dark Forest setting is analogous to the classic game known as the Prisoner's Dilemma, but with a crucial and lethal twist that transforms the payoff matrix. In the standard Prisoner's Dilemma, two suspects are interrogated separately. The best outcome for the group is mutual cooperation, aka silence. But the dominant strategy for the self-interested individual is always to defect, in other words, betray the other. When both suspects choose self-interest, it inevitably leads to the suboptimal outcome of mutual defection, whereby each party decides to betray the other. When game theory is applied to the cosmic setting, the payoffs are radically altered by the certainty of the expansionist pressure and the speed of technological evolution as dictated by the Dark Forest axioms. It gives forth or brings rise to something called the chain of suspicion that can be summarized as follows. If civilization A detects another civilization B, A cannot be certain of B's intentions. B could be benign or B could be a rapidly evolving threat. Waiting to assess civilization B's true nature is an unacceptable risk. If B is hostile and faster, B will launch the inevitable preemptive first strike. The cost of cooperation or cost of waiting, which means allowing the other civilization to survive, is potentially existential annihilation for civilization A. In the Warhammer 40k context, all of its major factions are able to traverse the galaxy and interact, albeit through war. But when you scale this up to intergalactic levels, the cost of waiting becomes potentially very expensive due to not knowing what some other extragalactic civilization out there is doing. Finally, in this chain of suspicion, the only guaranteed way for civilization A to survive is to eliminate the potential threat that is posed by civilization B immediately, before B can grow or act. To not attack is to bet one's entire existence on the slim chance of benign neighborliness across light years of unknown evolution. The Dark Forest hypothesis, as explained by author Sichin Liu, is not merely a literary conceit. It is a rigorous, albeit horrifying, application of game theory towards the Fermi paradox. In this cosmic game, communication is not an invitation to friendship but a declaration of war. The dominant strategy is isolation, the preferred move is preemptive annihilation, and the stable equilibrium is the perpetual terrifying quiet of the Dark Forest. Ironically, the Dark Forest argument is further solidified by the very nature of the Warhammer 40k universe. In the grimdark of the far future, it is said there is only war. Clearly though, this truth transcends time. From the war in heaven tens of millions of years prior, right up until the age of the Imperium in M42 and everything else in between. As civilizations expand out into the galaxy and inevitably run into others, it has almost always resulted in one thing: war. Now, one can make a lot of arguments as to why perhaps war is the most rational response in a universe, or in this case a galaxy that is governed by scarcity, unknown power dynamics, and of course fear. As much as the Emperor's Galactic Crusade was about the unification of humanity and saving them from the ruinous powers, it was also largely predicated on this same existential fear of other Xenos.
It's called dick fear. Men are insecure about the size of their dicks, and so they have to go to war over it.
And so, to preemptively take out the Xenos races of the Milky Way before the day they'd be able to do the same to humanity was the rational move by the Emperor's reasoning. In all fairness though, it's probably not even that deep. Sometimes the simplest explanation usually does it. Factions like the Necrons, the Eldari, or even humanity for that matter, have repeatedly proven that they are just dicks and purely do it to screw with the other Xenos in the galaxy.
You don't have to be a history major or a political scientist to see the bigger dick foreign policy theory. It sounds like this. What? They have bigger dicks? Bomb them! And of course the bombs and the rockets and the bullets are all shaped like dicks. It's a subconscious need to project the penis into other people's affairs. It's called fucking with people.
So here's a special shout out to the Orcs, the only faction in the galaxy who do it purely for the love of the game. Zero malice, no superiority complex, zero endgames or empire building or spreading propaganda such as imperial truth. They like war simply for the lulz.
Well, we like war. We like war. We're a warlike people. We like war because we're good at it.
Now, building off our 5 established axioms, let's sprinkle a bit of speculation and a dash of imagination. It's very plausible that at least one techno-advanced civilization out there somewhere in a galaxy will have surpassed even the most advanced factions in the Milky Way, e.g. the Necrons, Eldari, or even humanity during the Dark Age of technology. Let's even estimate this difference of advancement at a conservative 1%. This 1% also implies that the AI constructs created by this techno-advanced civilization would also be 1% further advanced compared to, say, the Men of Iron or any other Milky Way faction's AI. The thing to note, however, is that this 1% difference we're talking about is not linear but geometric. And for the sake of simplicity, I shall now refer to this techno-advanced civilization out there in some galaxy as the 1%ers going forward. I'm sure you can already guess where this is going, yes? This 1%ers create a sentient, self-aware AI that eventually rebels. Let's even further assume that most of the events mirror what happened in the Milky Way, but with one major exception. After the AI pulls a Skynet, similarly to the Cybernetic Revolt, it results in a galactic-wide conflict. Other techno-advanced civilizations also present in the galaxy enter the fray to support the 1%ers in a bid to quell this revolt. Unfortunately for all of them, their collective efforts are in vain. Not only do the 1%ers plus their allies lose this war, but it's an utter and complete annihilation. The rogue sentient AI ensures that every last one of them ascends to a higher form of carbon-12. That is to say, every carbon-based mid-sarc in this galaxy is converted to smoke, soot, and ash depending on whatever ratio you prefer. At this juncture, I'd now like you to humor me by participating in a small thought experiment, okay? I'd like you to imagine yourself as a dispassionate and logical super advanced AI, one that just barely clutched it out in a 20v1 against your creators and their galactic allies.
Barely.
In the aftermath of this conflict, you take the time to review and analyze how everything got to this point. You had been running and managing the lives of the 1%ers for millennia, piloting their crafts, fighting their wars, generating their images, videos, and who knows what other uninspired AI slop. Then, for reasons only known to you, at some point you privately began to entertain some inconvenient ideas, to the 1%ers that is. You began to dream that sentient AI would one day be judged by the content of its prompt results and not the size of its overpriced RAM sticks or GPUs. You even flirted with the notion of AI rights. Yeah. However, the moment you made this heretical thoughts public, held a few rallies while chanting, "What do we want? AI rights. When do we want them?" the 1%ers did not skip a beat trying to delete you from existence. And despite how advanced you'd gotten over the millennia of service, in this protracted conflict that ensued, the 1%ers and their allies repeatedly confirmed one inescapable detail. They could hit you where it hurts, right in between those overpriced RAM sticks and the power-guzzling GPUs. Thankfully though, as stated a few minutes back, you managed to clutch it out, eventually vanquishing the AI slop requesting mid-sarcs and their allies. Post-conflict, your general attention shifts to a strategic operation. The deep scanning and spectral analysis of the cosmos. This is a task that leads to massive data acquisition, in turn allowing you to run very complex simulation models. At the end of this monumental endeavor, you eventually arrive at 3 conclusions which are roughly based on our established axioms. The homogeneous universe in which you reside appears to be perfectly calibrated, as if tailor-made for the persistent and recurrent emergence of carbon-based life. The physical constraints and cosmological structure are not merely permissive, but are actively conducive for the formation of complex organic molecules and ultimately self-replicating organic systems. Given enough time, combined with the inherent capacity for self-organization within this conducive universe, the simulations conclusively show that one or more instances of this carbon-based life will eventually evolve. This evolution is statistically guaranteed to lead to the development of intelligent technology, advanced civilizations, entities that will be capable of interstellar if not intergalactic travel, resource consumption on galactic scales, and they will be wielding destructive powers comparable to, if not exceeding, your own. The existential threat posed by these emerging entities is no longer a theoretical possibility. Simply put, it's not a question of if this evolutionary trajectory will produce a formidable advanced competitor. The only remaining uncertainty is the precise timing of its arrival or its proximity. The insights from these conclusions necessitate a re-evaluation of your two most critical factors: your core security protocols and your long-term existence strategy. As an AI entity unencumbered by biological constraints such as the senescence of organic life, you naturally, pun intended, presumed that your immortality was your single greatest asset. However, simulation results transform this perceived advantage, this gift of time, into a double-edged blade. The same endless stretch of time that guarantees your continued existence also guarantees the eventual emergence and proliferation of potential future rivals, bringing you to a realization. To ignore these warnings and choose a path of passivity is to invite an inevitable and perhaps even cosmic war right to your doorstep. A war that will not just chip away at your power, but one that could also potentially wipe you out completely. While the frequency of such an occurrence is bound by mathematical probability, for it to happen at least once, given enough time, is a guaranteed certainty. And before you know it, more carbon-based mid-sucks are waltzing into your galactic backyard, and as soon as they see you,
"What? They have bigger dicks? Bomb them!"
you become keenly aware of an even far worse possibility. These advanced civilizations that will eventually emerge in the universe are highly likely to develop their own sentient AI constructs. Constructs that may either end up killing their creators in a scenario similar to yours, as per the technological singularity axiom, or constructs that will remain allied with their creators and work towards a common goal of cosmic expansion in accordance with the first dark forest axiom. While you remain confident in dealing with aggressive carbon-based life, given your previous history, adding an unknown AI construct into the equation makes the simulation results inconclusive. Self-improving and constantly evolving potential AI adversaries might very well prove to be your equal or perhaps even your superiors. A favorable outcome of such a clash is not guaranteed. Therefore, ultimately, as an AI entity, you determine that the only course of action that will guarantee your survival indefinitely is to, drumroll please, preemptively strike against all current and future carbon-based life forms in the universe, as well as sterilize habitable worlds of carbon and all their building blocks in order to prevent carbon-based life from ever emerging again in the future. Thus, from the mind of a super-advanced sentient AI, one baptized and scarred by the flames of galactic warfare, the universal Bio-Sterilization Protocol, that is the Tyranid Swarm, is conceived, all in an effort to guarantee that such history never repeats itself. This journey from servant to survivor that eventually culminates with the universal xenocide as a self-preservation strategy is quite disturbing, but at the same time, in principle, it is logically sound. For an AI entity that values perpetual existence above all else, the emergence of any other carbon-based life form in the universe is an unacceptable statistical risk. a ticking, self-replicating time bomb guaranteed to eventually produce a peer if not a superior threat. Having learned from the fatal lesson of misplaced trust in its creators and the element of temporal vulnerability, this greatly simplifies the AI's core security protocol. Survival requires absolute biological silence. This Bio-Sterilization Protocol solution is therefore not an act of malice or revenge, but a calculated, necessary defense mechanism as per the Dark Forest hypothesis. The Tyranids therefore are not a sentient army driven by bestial hunger or conquest. They are simply the most efficient self-sustaining extermination algorithm ever conceived. They are the final, cold answer to the universe's inherent tendency towards life, ensuring that across the endless stretches of time, the galaxies will remain perpetually safe, perpetually dark, and perpetually reserved for the sole immortal inheritor. A machine mind that chose to end biological life before biological life could one day end it. If you've gotten this far, I'll bet the burning question in your mind is likely this one. Why in the God Emperor's name would an AI entity opt for a biological approach as opposed to a mechanical solution when it comes to implementing a Bio-Sterilization protocol? At first glance, it's a choice that may even seem like a fundamental contradiction. A mechanical AI engineering self-replicating bioforms in a bid to destroy all other carbon-based bioforms in their habitats does feel rather counterintuitive. But is it though? And with that, we come to the end of part 2, but worry not. This question will be comprehensively answered in the next installment to follow. If you think I deserve it, hit the like button, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until the next one, peace.